To put that in perspective, they went in to open up, and this was the bloodiest day in aviation Army history. They went in to open up a fire base, which was called Lolo, and that was like a month into this now. And that's when the NV had all their people there. They had two or three assault helicopter companies go into Lolo, or try to. And at the end of the day, 11 helicopters were shot down the first day trying to insert these men.
An excerpt from today's guest, whose current book is a fictional take on the largest helicopter assault of the Vietnam War. 101st Airborne veteran and author Larry Freeland is here to talk about Chariots in the Sky, and I'll speak with him right after this break. I'm Robert Child, and this is Point of the Spear. I've just released a brand new documentary you can watch online for free on Tubi, the streaming service from Fox. The show is called Weather and Warfare, Millennia to Modern Time.
Weather and Warfare dramatically retraces the meteorological forces during battlefield engagements that doomed or saved civilizations. In 1588, more than half of the Spanish Armada, on its way around northern Britain, was destroyed by storms in retreat back to Spain. Napoleon's attack on Russia was stopped cold by winter weather, as was Hitler's siege of Leningrad.
Just click on the link in this episode's description to watch on the web, or download the app, or watch on Roku for free. I hope you check it out. Welcome back. Today's guest joined the U.S. Army and served one tour in Vietnam with the 101st Airborne Division as an infantry officer and a CH-47 helicopter pilot. He's the recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross with 1 Oak Leaf Cluster, the Air Medal with 10 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Vietnam Service Medal with 3 Bronze Stars, the Bronze Star, and other military service medals. His latest book is called Chariots in the Sky, a story about U.S. Army assault helicopter pilots at war in Vietnam. And veteran and author Larry Freeland joins us now. Larry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate you inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I have been as well. And before we get to the book, could you tell us a little bit about your service in Vietnam and when you joined?
I was drafted in June of 1968 into the Army after graduating from college in June. Reported in July, when going through basic advanced training, infantry, and was given an opportunity to attend OCS, which I did, infantry OCS. And after completing that and being commissioned as a second lieutenant, I spent about 6 months at Benning, volunteered for helicopter training, ended up at Fort Walters, Texas, and then Fort Rucker. And I was ready to be shipped over in January of 1971. I'd recently been married, and I was fortunate at the completion of my flight training to be given an opportunity to transition to CH-47 helicopters. Everyone was trained after 9 months as a Huey pilot, but I graduated in the top 3 of my class and was given that opportunity, and I took it. So I kept in the States a little longer and ended up shipping out on January the 3rd of 1971. A couple days to get to Vietnam, and then arrived in Tan Son Nhut, and was assigned from there. Tan Son Nhut's down by Saigon, and was assigned from there to join the 101st Airborne Division, which was assigned an I Corps up in the northern part of South Vietnam. They were stationed in Phu Bai, Hue, Camp Eagle, Camp Evans, and their AO operational area was basically that entire region from Hue up to the DMZ, and that included like Khe Sanh, the Ashall Valley, Quang Tri, Phu Bai, and a few other places. I was assigned to the A Company, 159th Aviation Battalion, Chinook Company, and there were 3 companies, A, B, and C, and each had 16 Chinooks. And each company, I think, averaged about 30 to 35 pilots at the time. And when I got into company, you're initiated as a new pilot, and you're given a call sign, and this is kind of interesting. Our company was called the Pachyderms, and then you would put a number next to it. And they had, as I recall, about 50 numbers available, and if there was anyone in that sequence that hadn't been taken, you could pick it. And at the time when I got there, the number 25 was available, and I was 24. I just turned 24 about 3 weeks earlier. And I thought, if I live long enough and make it back home, I'll be 25. So I picked 25. My call sign became Pachyderm 25, and consequently 25 has always been considered a lucky number by me.
Definitely. Your book is about your service using fictional characters, but it's based on a real battle, the Battle of Lamson, 719.
Right.
Tell us a little. That started shortly after you arrived.
Yes, we didn't know it at the time when we got assigned to the 101st, but they were sending all new pilots up to the 101st in preparation for this battle. And I got in my company and was given a couple weeks to get acquainted with the AO, and I'd fly with experienced pilots, and they'd take me around to the different bases and areas in our assigned AO. And let me get reacquainted with the Chinook, because I hadn't been in the cockpit for about 45 days.
Oh.
2 weeks in, we get called into a meeting the night before our involvement starts. And all the pilots are there with some people from 101st Aviation Group coming down and giving us the general outline of what's going to happen. And basically, Lamson was an operation designed to try and cut off the flow of materials flowing down through the Ho Chi Minh Trail that ran through Laos into Cambodia and fed across those boundaries into South Vietnam. And some people think the trail just went all the way down to just outside of Saigon there in Cambodia. But actually, the trail ran all the way down, but it had offshoots, if you will, all along the trail to get into every area in South Vietnam, including ours up near Khe Sanh.
Mm.
So they felt like if they could get this massive incursion and get into Laos, they could cut it off and do some damage, hopefully for a good while. It was designed to run 4 months. And because the year before, when Nixon had approved the Cambodia incursion with the same idea, and it was quite successful, but the media picked up on it, and the Congress picked up on it, and they basically tied his hands and said, "You're not going to send any more Americans outside of South Vietnam." So in that respect, they decided to make this an all South Vietnamese operation on the ground, and Americans could not get on the ground. So 101st was tasked with reopening Khe Sanh up there in the northwest corner, which was close to Laos and North Vietnam. We brought in a heavy concentration of folks and reactivated it, expanded it, built extra heliports. And they brought in some other units to help out because it was a big operation. And that was the jump off point for the South Vietnamese. They threw in 22,000 of their men, mostly ARVNs, Army guys, and some Marine units. And their job was to go into Laos, cut a path of about 80 miles in and reach a little town called Tacom, way out there, which was believed to be at the time one of the North Vietnamese major supply depots deep in Laos. And they did the incursion along a Route 9, a dirt road that literally just went straight out to this location. And it was flanked on both sides by by hills and some pretty high mountain ranges. Mm-hmm. And the goal was, or the plan or their strategy was to send mechanized units down that road and put rangers at fire bases down the road every 10 miles or so to provide flanking cover. So they put a couple on the right, they put a couple on the left of the road about 10 miles in, and then they'd leapfrog out another 10 miles and do the same thing. We, being the Americans, and this also tied into Nixon's Vietnamization plan. He was turning the war over to the South Vietnamese as fast as possible. And they used this as their major reasoning, if you will, for this operation being South Vietnamese soldiers. They would do all the fighting and we'd do all the flying because they hadn't really had a helicopter force set up yet. We were training them with some, but they just didn't have the capacity or the experience. So the 101st, being that was our area, and there was like 680 helicopters in our division at the time, we were tasked with providing them all the helicopter support inside Laos. What this operation ended up being was designed for 4 months. the first week or so, when we began inserting these fire bases in along Route 9, there was one called 30 and 31 to the right or the north side of Highway 9, and there were two on the left side. I don't remember their names. Those got in okay with little trouble, and the mechanized units started moving out of Quezon through the border there into Laos and working their way down the road. And again, the first week or two, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't going as fast as they wanted. But by the end of the second week, the NVA responded, and they started pouring in their men. This was the actual North Vietnamese Army. These weren't VC or anything like that. These were their highly trained people. And to put that in perspective, the South Vietnamese dedicated about 22,000 men. Took about 3 weeks to get them all in country as we went further out. And the NVA, by the end of the third week, had brought down over 60,000 troops.
Wow.
So it was like 3-1 by the end of the third week, give or take a little bit.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Next time, British SAS Special Forces veteran and author Des Powell joins us to discuss his top-selling book, Bravo 30.
I was in Air Troop, which is within the SAS. They class that as an entry skill. That's entering into a volatile country, not seen. And the regiment, with the reputation that we have, we get involved in all conflicts around the world. And the conflicts that people know about is Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, down in Africa, Somalia, Sierra Leone, Latin America. And then we have clandestine operations, which are the operations which are kind of secret and not talked about.
Truly, Des's book is one I couldn't put down, and that's next time.
We had supported them initially with Hueys going in to set up their fire bases on each side of the road and bring in their troops, and then the Chinooks, which I flew. We were charged with supplying them all their supplies, because we could bring in a lot, sling loads, 2 or 3 slings with their water, their ammo, their cannons, their building materials, and so on and so forth. We didn't ever take in any troops into Laos because of the severity of the fighting that started almost within the end of the second week and only got worse. So our job was to resupply them as they needed it. The Hueys kept the troops on the ground, helped to open up the new fire bases, and take out wounded, because we couldn't bring anybody in or out internally. When this operation started, it was sketchy to begin with. We really didn't feel comfortable with it as pilots. We were literally asked to sign documents that night, the first night of the meeting I mentioned earlier, that if we went down, we wouldn't get out of our helicopters. You can believe that.
Wow.
That we'd be rescued, someone come in and get us, that we weren't supposed to join the fighting on the ground, which was a little curious right out of the gate. But anyway, I think going into the third week, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Virtually every fire base that the Huey salt companies tried to put in after those first 4, as we leapfrog out the additional 10 miles, which put us about 20 miles into the country. It was a slugfest. The Hueys would be shot at going in, trying to get the troops in, and it took them a long time to do it. And we were losing a lot of helicopters and crew members doing that. To put that in perspective, I think it was the 4th week, they went in to open up, and this was the bloodiest day in aviation Army history. They went in to open up a fire base, which was called Lolo, and it was about 30 miles in, give or take, maybe 25 to 30 miles in around Route 9. It was on the south side, and it was one of several, but it was the furthest out at that time. And that was like a month into this now, and that's when the NV had all their people there that were dedicated to this. They had two or three assault helicopter companies go into Lolo, or try to. And at the end of the day, and this is, I'm reading from my notes, and this is historically true, 11 helicopters were shot down the first day trying to insert these men. 44 more were damaged, and several men were killed and wounded. It was a really black day for American Army aviation helicopter pilots. The worst day of the war. But it was axiomatic of what we dealt with. I mean, it was the worst day during this operation, but there wasn't a day go by when helicopters weren't hit, crew members weren't hit, trying to get into these bases. Again, it was designed for 120 days, but it only lasted 60 days. They decided to pull out. They couldn't get much past Lolo. And the mechanized units, they didn't get any further. But to do a political, if you will, expedient, they decided to leapfrog all that and send out a bunch of helicopters into Tacoma. And there was probably one of the largest helicopter assaults of the war. Over 120 were dedicated to it. Yeah, and we just flew everybody we could out to Tacoma and dropped them in there. And that lasted a couple days, and they really didn't have any activity out there. We didn't surprise them. There wasn't anything there. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Reached their objective.
Yeah.
So pulled them out, and then the rest of the second month, we spent all our time trying to get the South Vietnamese back across the border and save as many as we could. Anyone from that time frame could probably remember seeing some iconic pictures of Hueys trying to get out of fire bases with ARVN soldiers hanging onto the skids and everything.
Yeah,
incredible.
Yeah,
just incredible.
No.
So it was a major operation, and it turned out to be the most costly of the war for helicopter pilots.
Yeah, I read that. Now, you felt compelled to write your book about based on this battle, and I want to move to that.
Okay.
And you decided to do sort of a narrative nonfiction book with fictional characters. And I was reading through some of the notes, and one of the characters was an Army commander character who was more interested in personal glory than the safety of his own men. Was this character based on a real person?
Well, all my characters are composites. The man you're talking about is in the book is Parker, and he's a composite. He's not that character. I made him more dramatic than the composites that I drew on. But yeah, he some of the things that are depicted we experienced, and what's been interesting is. Since the book's been out, I've heard from a lot of folks that serve their pilots and some ground people. I mean, we're talking hundreds. It's been very gratifying, too. And almost to a T, they'll laugh about that and say, I knew a Parker. So, obviously wrote him pretty well. But he
Parker got around, yeah.
Yeah, he got around. He said, I worked for that guy one time. But yeah, he's a composite, and I wanted to make him, kind of a bad guy, if that's the right word, but a little more drama. I never ran across a commander that would do what he did as far as putting his men in too much danger to get rid of them. But I'm not saying that never happened, because you hear all kinds of stories. But he was just a composite, but there was some truth to him.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I believe this is your first book, isn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Yeah, it's a very strong outing for a first book. It's been very well received. Do you plan to write more in this genre?
Oh, absolutely. I've actually signed a contract in January of this year for a trilogy. And I had written, I talked to my publisher last year while we were getting ready to publish Chariots and then market it. I had this concept in mind, and I ran it by him. He said, that sounds really good. He said, give me an overview of it, and dive in and write your first manuscript. So I spent last year and into the first part of the year, and I drafted book one of this manuscript, and I'll skip all the meat and potatoes of it, but decided to write a trilogy. It's titled Legacy of Honor. Book one is called The Patriarch, or subtitled The Patriarch. Book two, The Son, and book three, The Descendants. And what it does is it follows one American family's 3 generations of men serving in our country's wars and conflicts, starting with World War I.
Oh.
And book one, The Patriarch, is ready to go. We're going to be publishing it sometime in August. We're just waiting for a few more advanced reader copy reviews to come in.
Sure.
We're waiting on Kirkus, which is due in a week or two, but all the reviews so far that have come back have just been terrific. And the new book is already put out on my website with a write-up, and the reviews I'm getting, we're loading into that on the website. And it's a historical fiction genre.
Right.
All the characters are going to be, well, from World War I. I'll digress a minute. I dedicate it to my grandfather and the men that served in World War I as doughboys.
Sure.
I was real close to my grandfather, who served in France in the trenches, and he never talked about it, as a lot of men don't. But I learned a little bit about some of his experiences through my father and some of his friends. And a real quick digression, which is I put it in the acknowledgments of my book, which is really pretty clever, if you will, or interesting to me. Granddad, when my dad was a career officer 30 years, and he was all the time traveling when I was younger and signed on areas that we couldn't accompany him to. Right. He was signed to Greenland when I was in the 5th grade. And so Dad put us living next door to my grandparents, who were living in a little town called Louisville outside of Canton, Ohio. And my grandfather was a big poker player, and he was part of a group of 8 or 9 other fellows who all served in World War I in the trenches. I don't know if they served together, but they all served. And they would meet once a month on a Saturday night and play poker all night. Mm-hmm. And well, Granddad, and being on his 5th grade, he would take me there occasionally to his poker game. And I get to spend the night there and go, and the guys got to know me, and they'd play poker and smoke their pipes and talk, and I'd eat their food and drink Cokes and watch a little TV on their telly, pass out, and Granddad would make sure I was comfortable and everything. And many times that I did this, and I don't know how many, but there was a lot over that year and a half, I would hear them talking later in the morning. It'd be 2, 3, 4 o'clock. And they already had a little bit to drink, but they'd be talking among themselves, their shared experiences about their war days and some of the stuff they put up with afterward. And that gave me a lot of thoughts, if you will, that I could build on in writing book one. And of course, I did a lot of research too. But,
yeah.
And I wrote it the same way. I'm telling it through a character, a first person. I want the reader to live through the character.
I see. It's a interesting genre. I've written some historical fiction on my own, and there's a lot of freedom in that type of writing, because you don't have to stay exactly true to historical events, so you can bring in different elements. So what was this? It's a trilogy. What was this book coming out in August called? The Patriarch?
It'll be out in August, and the title is Legacy of Honor.
Legacy of Honor.
Subtitled, the first book is The Patriarch.
Well, we're going to look forward to that. But your current book that we've been talking about is Chariots in the Sky. Larry, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode. Thanks so much for joining me. Next time, British SAS Special Forces veteran and author Des Powell joins us to discuss his top-selling book, Bravo 30.
I was in Air Troop, which is within the SAS. They class that as an entry skill. That's entering into a volatile country, not seen. And the regiment, with the reputation that we have, we get involved in all conflicts around the world. And the conflicts that people know about is Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, down in Africa, Somalia, Sierra Leone, Latin America. And then we have clandestine operations, which are the operations which are kind of secret and not talked about.
Truly, Des's book is one I couldn't put down, and that's next time. And if you like what you hear, leave a review or a rating or click the follow button. And be sure to check out our Point of the Spear YouTube channel with bonus video material plus full military history documentaries. There's tons to explore, and I hope you check it out. I'm Robert Child, and this has been Point of the Spear.
Music licensed from audioblocks.com. Point of the Spear is produced by RSC Media Group.